All right, a warm welcome to those attending and also to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is a meeting of the Corporate Resources and Infrastructure Select Committee. My name is Councillor John Riley and I'm the chairman of this meeting. A key role of this committee is to monitor the performance of local public services within our remit and to hold in-depth reviews on topics of resident interest. We engage with a range of external witnesses in our activity, which can include community groups, residents and subject matter experts. Where we identify areas for change or improvement, we make recommendations to the decision-making cabinet. Details of the business to be considered today are shown on the agenda, copies of which are accessible on YouTube underneath the broadcast. Please note that members of the committee will be using tablets or laptops to view the agenda today. We're not expecting a fire drill, so if the fire alarm goes off, please follow Anisha to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting points. For those in the room, please switch any mobile devices to silent before the meeting starts. For those watching via YouTube, if you are so minded, you can complete one of our resident feedback forms. These can be found in the information section under the YouTube video. These forms are intended to help us improve the way in which we run our meetings. I'm now going to ask everyone who's present, starting with Councillor Mathers and working our way round, to introduce themselves, please.
Councillor Stuart Mathers.
Councillor Alagaran.
Councillor Narinda Gog.
Matt Davis, Interim Director, Strategic and Operational Finance.
Michael Norton, Head of the Capital Programme Work Service.
Andy Goodwin, Head of Strategic Finance and Deputy 151.
Chris Malin, Head of Finance for Corporate Services and Finance.
Kerry Lamoureux, Head of Finance for Place.
Carrie Whelan, Corporate Director of Place.
Matthew Albridge, Chief Operating Officer.
Councillor Chubdar. Councillor Kaushik Banerjee.
And Councillor Adam Bennett.
Anisha Tedji, Democratic Services.
All right, thank you. Can I ask everybody to make sure that when they are speaking, they press the now long button, and they'll see if the mic is working by the red collar that comes up on the microphone. Also speak up because I've got a terrible head cold and I can't hear anything. All right, I'm going to make a sort of opening comment. You will have seen the papers that we have for this meeting. Given the current and increasingly challenging issue of the financial situation both inside the council and externally, I have decided to reset the focus of this committee, whose primary task is to scrutinise the financial situation of the council. This includes the committee scrutinising and assisting senior officers with budget monitoring, and where needed, be issuing interim reports to Cabinet concerning budgetary pressures and how they may be mitigated and acted upon. Part of our role will be to ensure that the budget approved this year will be closely monitored and scrutinised in terms of the savings and the budget as agreed. In order to do this, I have requested that the committee receives monthly reports and information in order to track and drill down on those savings and get details of delivery of the specific savings in the service areas. This will be achieved by senior officers coming before this committee, as we have this evening, each month, to account for their actions in how they will deliver the savings in service areas while maintaining high quality services. This will strengthen our financial security across the council. This is being adopted by other scrutiny chairmen with whom I've been in discussion. But we, as the comparative overarching scrutiny committee relating to finance, take the financial lead on this. So I have undertaken on behalf of the committee this enhanced role, so that financial scrutiny and budget monitoring is placed at the forefront of our financial oversight. The committee will be expected to function at a very high level, ensuring that we hold officers and cabinet members to account. So that does not mean that we will abandon projects and certain things that we've talked about in the past. Indeed, the project for this year that we've adopted, the commercialisation of and identification of assets, is certainly something that actually ties in very well with what I've just said. And Tanisha's been working very hard to set that up, but it has proved interestingly challenging. And it shows the problem, because assets seem to be spread across many, many different departments and areas of responsibility. And one of the pretty obvious things that I think we would like to do is to be able to bring the knowledge of the overall asset under one roof, or at least have a single point of contact, so that we can talk to somebody who knows where everything is and what it is and what needs doing with it. But we'll come back to that. So this evening we have an array of our financial officers, and you've heard them introduce themselves and their roles. We've got, as part of our papers, a series of tables which perhaps to an extent need explanation. Oh, one of the other things that I've also said, and I think you all saw this previously, was that rather than have officers come along and go into lengthy explanations about the reports that we've been given, that we, and I think it's not unreasonable, should assume that we on the committee have read those reports and go straight into questioning on the basis that we have read those reports. And it gives us much more time in that sense to be able to do this slightly dual but very much enhanced role, because every meeting we will be having this discussion and these questions on budget monitoring. So we have these various tables, but I think very much for this evening what we will be able to do is to deal specifically with tables 1, 2 and 3, and leave the others for the moment to one degree or another. All right. Apologies for absence.
No apologies.
Thank you. Declarations of interest as usual. Minutes of the previous meeting. All agreed? Thank you. To confirm that items of business in part 1 will be in public, and any part 2s will be considered in private, but I don't think we've got any of those. We'll go straight to the budget and spending report and what is described as select committee monitoring. So, with those comments that I've made earlier on in mind, so these tables, as I say, tables 1 and 2 are really the major focus of this evening, and 3 to that extent. What I've also asked officers is, as we go through these, some of these descriptions, some of the wording needs to be explained, and perhaps one of those areas is what is described as two of them actually I just didn't understand. Corporate adjustments and growth. If you look on table 1 on page 7, we have a list of headings there: portfolio, service, 24-25 budget, inflation, and then corporate adjustments and growth. Would someone like to just help us with what corporate adjustments and growth means? And you'll need to put your microphone on and get it really close to you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll cover the corporate items. So in the February Cabinet report that set out the Council's budget strategy that ultimately went to Council, You'll have in there a number of appendices that are going to set out how we build the council's budget. That starts from your roll forward position, it brings in inflation, demographic growth, and your savings, and then that fourth one is your corporate items, and those are things that generally are cross-cutting across the council, so not particularly relating to individual service areas, or certainly the drivers behind those items. So one of the large ones in here within the finance area is your capital financing. So that is the result of the borrowing required to fund the capital programme, where we need to fund the expenditure through borrowing rather than securing grants and capital receipts. So you've got a few other adjustments that have gone through in that area. So you have got in there, we did a rebasing exercise in 24-25. That rebasing kind of reset the council's budgets. We needed to ultimately fund those in 25-26, so that was a large element of it. And then you've got other things that are kind of corporate, like levies and subscriptions. So some of the movement in this, the remit of this committee will be things like your concessionary fares levy. So that's where we're paying for your 65 plus freedom passes. So although it sits within the finance directorate, it's not really a kind of core finance kind of service delivery in terms of what the team are delivering. They're really the main kind of adjustments that have gone through in there. You've got one in technology, which is where we're putting more money into technology and looking at supporting things like the Oracle platform. So again, although they're very finance and digital kind of driven, they are more kind of cross-cutting as the Oracle platform supports the business as a whole. Thank you. I'll hand over to Matt for the other question.
Thank you, Chair. If you look at Table 1, all the black numbers are net expenditure. There might be some income in there, but that's the net cost, expenditure over income. Any red number is a reduction in expenditure or an increase in income. We know we've got demand-driven service pressures. Where we've funded those by giving the departments extra money to provide a service, that is that growth column. Now, growth may be because we're either expanding the amount of service delivery, we may be increasing the quality and the offer, or it may just be to meet pressures so that the actual level of service doesn't increase, but the costs have gone up. Where national insurance went up and there may be suppliers impacting and saying we need more money to provide the same level of care, that would be a growth item. It doesn't necessarily mean that we've expanded the service. It means it's cost more, or maybe our income's gone down. Maybe a government grant has been cut and that becomes an extra net cost of a service. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. That's useful. Councillor Bunbury.
Thank you, Chair. So, just having a look at Table 1 and the column that says budget. Is that the budget for the entire department that's detailed in that column?
The starting column was last year's budget, i.e. 2 weeks ago for the old financial year. We then make adjustments for inflation growth. The end column is the new budget for the current year, for 25-26, the year that we've just started. What these numbers don't include at the moment are the departmental recharges. So the cost of finance is allocated as a pro rata share on a reasonable assumption against adults, education, homes and communities, as well as amongst the other services. That's not in these numbers. These are the draft numbers. We are recalculating all the corporate recharges to make sure an appropriate charge is made against the cost of the services that are being supported. That will come in a second version of the budget book, and we will give you a revised copy as soon as those numbers are calculated, and we've done due diligence to check to make sure that they are the right charges.
All right. Just picking an example on Table 1. So in the middle, head of procurement and commissioning, and if we work our way across, so, and if I get these figures wrong, tell me. So 7852, that's 7,852,000?
7,800,000.
Yeah, okay. We've then got an inflation figure, a minus inflation figure. So is that as far as inflation affects that first figure? Yeah, okay. So there's no corporate adjustments. And then growth, 1,300,000. So is that an expansion of the cost of procurement and commissioning?
So the 1.3 million relates to services that sit within procurement. So there are two large services that sit there, one being energy and one being fleet. So 1 million is the impact of the increase on the energy costs, and 300,000 is impact on running the fleet service.
And then the saving, minus 12, what's that?
That's going to be linked to staffing. So the council increased the managed vacancy factor from an average of 3.5% in 24-25 to 4.5% in 25-26. So that's going to be applied against the procurement staffing team.
Matt?
Across the organisation, there is a natural turnover of staff, with people leaving to go to new jobs as recruiting replacements. The managed vacancy factor assumes that there will be a modest gap between one person leaving and us being able to go through the recruitment process and start paying a new person who starts a few weeks later. We've had a managed vacancy factor percentage in previous years. As part of the budget setting process, we thought it was prudent to increase that by 1.5%, so that we can use the money to deliver frontline services rather than having services underspend their budgets because they've got these and us not be able to apply it in the first instance to support frontline service.
Okay. Sorry, apologies, Matt. It was an increase of 1% from 3.5 to 4.5.
Correction, it was a 1% increase.
All right. Okay. And then 25-26 budget, 9 million or thereabouts. So that's around about a 2 million increase on what was budgeted in 24-25. Is that what that means?
Yes, it's from 7.8 to 9.1 is about a 1.2 million increase net, and it's made up of the numbers between the first column and the last, as you described.
All right, that's helpful. One for Matt, I expect, or Matthew rather. So the other sort of big figure in the growth column is under Director of Digital Data and Technology, 500 under growth. So what does that mean? We've got a minus 652 figure in the 24-25 budget, and then a growth figure of 500 there. Do you want to explain that one for us? Okay.
I'll go there. So that 500k relates to when we did the rebasing exercise. So it relates to a rebasing exercise we completed before Christmas. So it was resetting the budget. So we did that before the budget was published in February, and that's what that relates to. So that's resetting the budget in that example.
So when we think about particularly technology contracts, as you've seen, the cost of providing technology contracts are costing more and more each year, particularly with the invention of AI. Contracts get more and more expensive and over the cost of inflation. So we're seeing in some of our big systems increased costs, and we hadn't budgeted for those over the previous period. So the money in there has been representative of the increased costs of our technology contracts over the previous 2 years to catch us up to a point where we're not going to be overspent. Also, as we look to either renew or change our systems, the cost of replacing them. So, for example, this year we are looking to replace our planning system. So that's, planning applications coming in. We've got a very aged system, which is actually quite cheap at the moment, but they're sunsetting it, which means they're running it down and it will go out of production soon. The cost of replacing that is substantially more than the old version, as you would see. It's a bit like when you're upgrading your car. So, if you're buying an old Ford Focus, a new Ford Focus is going to be a lot more expensive because it's got more gizmos, it's a bit more expensive. You said use plain English, I'm trying to use plain English around technology contracts, so I'm doing my best. Things cost more, so so the money in there represents the increased cost of technology contracts, and we have a lot of technology contracts as an organisation.
Is the current turmoil at any risk of affecting those sorts of issues?
No, so the good side of things is that we've got a good commercial view of all our contracts, and actually for our bigger systems, we've got good commercial long-term deals that will enable us to vary it over time. So we're in a good place around those sort of contracts. We're particularly seeing the advent of smaller systems that have got AI plugins that are costing substantially more than you would normally get from a system. So we're seeing exponential increases on fairly normal systems in that space. When you mean turmoil, do you mean the global markets and all those kind of things? No, we're relatively unaffected by that sort of stuff. That's more, more pensions, treasury kind of approaches that will be hit, but not in technology services. No, not at the moment.
Okay, Councillor Mathers and Councillor Banerjee.
Thank you, Chair, and I do appreciate you bringing this to the committee, and I appreciate the renewed, or whatever the approach might be. I can never find the words as well as you, but no, this is exactly what we should be doing. Thank you, refocus, and so do take anything that I say in the context of the ethos of what we're trying to achieve. This is not about the politics of decisions made. This is about how we enable the decisions that have been made to really benefit our residents. And we know that financial robustness is something that if we don't get right, has an implication that goes well beyond what any of us would ever want to see in terms of Hillingdon's ability to deliver its services. I think for me, because we are a financially orientated committee, I really worry if we just focus on our corporate envelope when it comes to savings, because if one department doesn't make savings but the one that we oversee does, or the ones we oversee do, the impact on the council is still quite difficult, and it's the finance team, department, the wider corporate directors as well, who have to manage those priorities. So I'd always want to keep it in that context for me. And I know that because of matters raised within the budget, the Section 151 support, etc., that the Corporate Director of Finance and team will bring in SIFA to support with some financial capacity because of estimates and needing more information. And that's obviously going to have an impact on the savings deliverability as we go through the year. So it would be useful to, as part of future reports, I think, hear the improvements that are being made, or just sometimes that person who's not within the room who's seen something from a slightly different perspective built into the report, so we can get a sense of what's changing and what's improving. Because we've probably had very good estimates based on the knowledge that we have, but just having that outside expert sometimes provides something we didn't quite see. So it would be useful to get a sense of that. And so my questions are around, we have to achieve £34 million savings in year. Over the mid-term financial year, I think it's 55 million. I might be way off my numbers. I can't remember. It feels like February was a long time ago. There obviously needs to be cross-cutting initiatives, but it will be kind of corporate services and background services that will need to change their savings approach if other departments struggle. Now, I'm not asking for the details how other departments are going to achieve their savings. My question is, how are corporate services, how are the finance team, how are corporate directors working differently with one another to make sure that the standard of delivering savings and the actual getting the cash in the bank is going to be achieved across every department? Because I guess the buck kind of stops there with finance, with corporate directors on achieving savings. So I'm really interested in how things will be done differently from previous years where we ultimately delivered savings into making sure we get the cash in the bank by the end of March next year. Thank you for the longer question, Chair.
So in terms of, let me answer the question I think the fundamental question is, how do we keep an eye on our savings and how are we accountable? So in terms of the select committees in general, all of the select committees will be looking at the entirety of the council's budget, and obviously Cabinet look at the budget on a regular basis in terms of our financial monitoring, the first one being month 2. So in terms of our own internal governance, and you asked about corporate directors, and you've got 2 of them here, is we meet every Wednesday for corporate management team. We have a performance management framework, which is about how we understand our budget. So it's not just about looking at the savings, it's the entirety of looking at your budget. So the goal isn't just to look at how much you're saving, we've got to make sure we stick within the budget, because if you overspend it erodes what the savings you create. But as a corporate management team, we're looking at that on a very regular basis, because actually it's not the budget of each corporate director, it's the budget of a council, so it's a team effort to understand what that looks like. The accountability piece goes in our performance management framework, so as individuals and as senior officers. So as you've seen here, I've got a budget this year as the Chief Operating Officer. I have a savings target that I need to deliver. That is in my performance appraisal and in the performance management framework. And for example, each individual members of my team, so you've got them listed on table 1, so head of democratic services, head of legal service, they individually have a budget and a savings target. So there are regular monthly appraisals with them. There is a regular we have it weekly, a senior leadership team, where budget savings are on the agenda every 2 weeks, and then we discuss it at a corporate management team, so it goes right from the top, it goes upwards, and we discuss it with a corporate management team on at least a monthly basis. At the moment, we are having 3 weekly performance saving surgeries, so that's with the Chief Executive, the Director of Finance, and myself with corporate directors. Not as a what are you doing, do better, it's how can we support each other to deliver the savings. And quite naturally, you've got cross-cutting savings, because not everything is vertical in the way that the council owns and gives out its money. A lot of them will be issues that sit across the council. So you'll have an issue, for example, one of our biggest demand issues being temporary accommodation and homelessness. Well, that sits across multiple directors from very different kind of prisms. So it's about how we all work together, so we have a robust management framework to manage the savings. We do transparent reporting. Now it's coming to select committee, it goes into the Cabinet on a regular basis. So we've got the mechanism to do so, and then we bring in, as you said, external expertise to support us on the journey, which is part of some of the funding we have through our capital receipts, so transformation capitalisation, where we need additional capacity, capability, support to accelerate those savings. And lastly, as they're here, we've got our finance colleagues to help us quality assure what we're doing, because we have to stick to the accountancy rules. So for example, if they're savings, we're talking about revenue savings, making sure they are actual revenue savings, not cost avoidance, or they're not savings from different funding pots like the HRA, public health, etc., etc. So, and finance, so Chris is my head of finance, and I work with him on a very regular basis to understand the totality of our budget, to monitor what we're doing, monitor our savings, and understand also that we're not and I use a crude term, cost shunting. So we're not trying to save money in one area and passport it to another area of the council. So I think within councils, we're such complicated organisations, you have to have the robust framework, but also you have to understand the totality from a resident's point of view. So understanding how we're looking at our demand drivers, how we're working in partnership with our statutory and our non-statutory partners. So it's a complicated beast, but we have robust framework and governance to manage that process, and ever more so in this financial year, given the numbers and the volume of savings that we need to generate. Does that answer your question?
Okay, cool.
So that does answer it. That does tell me what's in place. I'm interested to know what of that is new, what of that is different. Because if we do the same as we did previous years, we still make savings, but they're not timely, and there's no give in this budget. And so I'm interested in kind of what's new, what's different,
So I think you referred to it. We are improving how we manage our finances in the first place. So you referred to the SIPFA work. So having better financial management, having better financial systems. So that will create us more transparency and an understanding of our budget in the first place. Actually, the preparatory work that we've done. So we're just starting the financial year, and as you will probably hear in this committee and in future committees, we are starting the work earlier to deliver those savings. We've had a more robust budget than we've had in previous years, so a better understanding of our financial position, but we've started early and we've started the plans earlier so we can start delivering those savings. As you know, every month or day that goes past, that's a reduction in savings. So it's not the pure figure, it's when you deliver those savings. So actually what's different is more fundamental is, I think as corporate directors, you'll hear from all the corporate directors, we've all got coherent plans and they're all RAG rated, they're all assessed for all the savings we've got this year with a level of confidence about the delivery of those savings. So we're in a better position, but we know we need to do better with our financial systems, processes, and how we do that to improve what we're doing as an organisation.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Carrie Whelan, Corporate Director of Place. I think one of the things I just wanted to add from being in the organisation just in the last year, one of the things I have noticed that has been considerably improved is the transparency of how we are working with our finance information and our finance data across not just with corporate directors, but actually cascading that information down to our departments, to service managers, so that everybody understands exactly what their envelope of spend is. And what we're finding is the work that we're also doing on a regular basis so we have senior management team meetings within our departments. One of the key factors that's on our agenda every single time is budgets. So Kerry, my budget manager, comes regularly to those meetings. What is also there is performance management. So we've got this whole sort of connected approach to ensuring that we are making sure everybody understands the need to fit within their envelope of spend. And that's something I've noticed has been a complete difference this year from when I first came to setting the budget this time and how we've been working in the last year, if that helps from somebody coming new into the organisation.
All right, thank you. Before I call on Councillor Banerjee, when I used to be chairman of Children's Services, and especially corporate parenting, looked after children, I used to have a mantra that we sent out saying, what would I do if it was my child? Well, I think under these auspices, I'm going to say, what would I do if it was my money? And have every person who's responsible for spending have that at the forefront of their minds. So when going into all these different meetings and so forth, and really it's to rebuild a much better business sense across the piece. All right, Councillor Banerjee.
Thank you, Chair. So actually building on something that the Chair said about 5-10 minutes ago, the conversation's moved on slightly, but I want to bring it back to the savings column and just focusing on the largest savings number, looking at the head of customer experience service. the saving seems a really high percentage of the original budget, and just some crude maths gave me a figure of like, it's the 25-26 number is 28% of the 24-25 number. So where I'm going with this question is, for something like customer experience, how does such a big savings maintain the quality of that department? Because my understanding of customer experience is that it's like residents facing, so taking such a big amount of their budget out, does that maintain what they're doing today, or can someone just please help me to understand that saving a bit better, please? And are they still delivering a high quality service, or has that been hampered by this huge reduction in their budget? Thank you.
It's me again. So we've covered this a little bit at the committee before about the investment in digital data and technology. So in terms of customer experience, it was nice to be cited in the recent government publication about AI of this local authority being the first to use AI in customer services. So you don't always have to see an intrinsic link between, and it's a good question, a budget reduction doesn't always mean a reduction in service. Actually, you've seen an improvement in service. We've halved the amount of people in customer experience over the last 2.5 years, but we've actually improved our offer because we've invested wisely as an organisation through the digital strategy in improving the technology we've got to support our residents. So at the moment we have Amazon Web Services delivering AI to our front door, which means you don't need as many humans to interact with people. So people can get their questions and their issues answered not by a human being, which enables us to reduce cost. In terms of 25-26, we've made a significant investment as an organisation in a new digital program with a partnership with Microsoft and a company called ICS.ai, which will be delivering a new web front end virtual agents, i.e. chatbots, and we'll also be looking at reducing the administrative burden that we have as an organisation by improving our processes and automating those. It looks like a big savings. Some of the savings has actually already been delivered. It's a lag from 24-25 and into 25-26. We've delivered a significant reduction of headcount by a restructure, and we've got a further 2 restructures to reduce the cost in those areas. In my own management of this service, this is actually a green project. I have every confidence we will deliver that number. In fact, I expect us to over-deliver that number because your question is, will we reduce the customer experience? I think it's a really interesting point, because I expect in perhaps the short term we might see some increases in complaints. We might see some increases in wait times whilst we implement the new approach. But actually when we hit kind of Christmas time and into the new year, we will start to see the customer experience improve. So I think whenever you do a significant implementation of a new system and a new approach, you often will see a dip in customer experience, an increase in complaints over a short period of time, whilst people get used to, human behaviour dictates that, I've always liked ringing up Hillingdon, someone's always answered the phone, I prefer to do that. And as we've discussed in this committee before about how we communicate and engage with our residents and support our residents from a digital inclusion point of view, about how do you access our services. Not everybody will like accessing virtual agents, for example, and it's a virtual agent as a handoff to a human being. But actually, when you look at the demography of Hillingdon, is the vast proportion of those are digitally literate and will prefer a council that is more 24/7, 365. You can access more services, and also a lot of our residents use things like My Account. So we'll be looking at rolling out more automations into My Account. So someone rings up and they've got an issue, or they've got an assessment, for example. So you've got a homelessness assessment, or you've got a missed bin, or a fly tip. So at the moment, you're having to ring up, and say, where are we with my housing assessment? So you're getting a lot of failure demand and a lot of cost built into what we do. What we'll be looking at is rolling out automations. So, for example, you're going to report a fly tip. You will be notified on the progress of that live on your phone. The same if you've got a homelessness application, you will have access into what's happening in your My account, but you also receive live notifications on your mobile phone as to the progress, and that will cut a lot of the cost and failure demand. So over the next year, and as you know, Councillor Banerjee, it doesn't happen like a click of the finger. These systems and approaches take time to do, and the process re-engineering the back office. But by having a better customer experience and reducing the cost in the back office, I have every confidence that we'll deliver this saving and actually deliver a much better experience for our residents from a customer point of view over the coming years. I think we've smartly invested, and we're one of the boldest local authorities in the country to push this forward.
All right, thank you. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for refocusing, was the word that was used. So my question is similar to, it sort of builds on Councillor Mather's point. So I got sent an online article by a resident that came out yesterday with the headline, Hillingdon Council faces financial crisis amid budgetary shortfalls. And it refers to a report from the Chief Financial Officer that indicates the issuance of a Section 114 notice is a distinct possibility due to the Council's declining reserves, history of overspending practices, and a failure to achieve savings targets. And it goes on to talk about the changes in reserves, etc., which we're kind of all aware of. What confidence can you give us and the residents watching that things have changed? And I know Matthew spoke through a few points then, but perhaps maybe individually in each of the areas of the business that you are kind of responsible for. Because it sounds good, but you do have to beg the question why this wasn't the culture that was in place before. The financial pressures on local authorities are not new. This has been here for over a decade. Help us see how we've now maybe reached this epiphany or point in time where actually we won't overspend this financial year. We will deliver on the savings. Because ultimately that's what we're going to have to do each month to make sure that when we come to assess.
Yeah, me again.
Can I suggest that all the answers are relatively pithy and
I'll be pithier than previous. So I think if you consider our budget, and I'll take us in a slightly different view, is as Hillingdon Council we run really good council services for our residents. Actually, our expenditure is outstripping our income at the moment. So if we thought about if we increased our income and I increased our council tax base, we'd be operating in a very different position. So, but we are where we are in terms of we are quite unlike a lot of local authorities because we haven't put our council tax base up over recent years, and you can only put it up by 5%. So we can't put it up by way of catching up. So if we were to put it up substantially, we wouldn't be in the position where we'd have to generate as many savings as we do. So that's a slightly different point, but I think it's important to contextualise. I'll probably go back to, I can talk for myself as a corporate director. So I absolutely know my budget. I absolutely know, and we talked about what's changed. Actually, we have better data. We have a better understanding of our demand. We understand the analytics around our services much better than we have. So through my team and my business intelligence team, we've got an understanding of what's happening completely across the council. What are our variables? What are our demand drivers? What are our costs per individual? And we can use that to make better decisions. So I think we're making better decisions over the last 12 months. Again, we've put substantial investment into understanding us as an organisation better than we ever have before. And what's critical in any organisation is better data, better decision making. So I think we're in a much better place there. And I can only speak for myself as Chief Operating Officer. I know my budget. I know absolutely what my savings are. I overachieved my savings last year. I will continue to deliver my savings. That's what I'm paid for, that's what I'm committed to do, but most importantly that's what our resident expects, to deliver those savings.
Shall I follow on? I think it's interesting, isn't it? I've written down here data and better understanding, so I would echo those. I mean, if you think over the last year that I've been here, we've had we have had quite a huge scrutiny of our budgetary situation. So we've had the ZBB process that we talked about. We've had a Star Chamber exercise to look at delivering service proposals that we can bring forward. But I think all in all, if you look certainly at my areas of the portfolio that you've got in your report in front of you, all the areas that we've put in there are the areas that we have assessed that we can exploit further. So, for example, if you look at things like garage voids, if you look at the inflationary uplifts that we've put into rental, if you look at the commercial leasing situation, these are all the ones that we've put in there to say there is still room to exploit those areas. And so, the direction of travel, if you like, for our property services over the next year is to make sure that we exploit those. And so, it's pretty much looking at the stuff that we haven't actually been able to say or deal with in a more commercial way in the past. How can we get more commercial? Now, that may mean that in certain areas, for example, on our commercial leases, that may mean that certain businesses will have to pay a more commercial rent. It may mean we've got a number of lettings, for example, where people are paying nil rent. It may well be that we take that view that, if you are letting premises, they have to be let at what the rateable, the rentable value should be. So these are all proposals that we can see that there is scope to exploit those further, and hence why we've put them in the budget proposals. So hopefully that's just a flavour of the stuff that's in our area on your report.
Okay, Matt.
Thank you, Chair. The budget that was approved in February, the Chief Financial Officer's statements on that budget recognised the risk that this council, like all councils, are facing with the funding and economic environment. Inflation rates, interest costs, demand for services that are demand-led that we have to meet. The risk provision in the previous year was £500,000. In recognition of that risk, it's £10.5 million in the new financial year. I would be a fool to sit here and say things won't happen that we didn't foresee, or happen. Some will happen worse, others will happen better. We are in the process through the external consultants that we brought in, that were referred to in the report, to deliver a better, more financial system. We'll be looking at the risks on the balance sheet, our closing accounts, looking at the budget setting and their adequacy. Things will happen. We've got £10.5 million to offset it. I'm not saying that we might even need all of that. Hopefully we won't. But what we are committed to as a CMT is putting in place regular monthly monitoring, and some things may be done even on a weekly basis where they are so demand-led and can change, so that we can take early interventions. I hope that helps.
Councillor Garg, then Councillor Gibber.
So that leads on nicely to my question, which is around the investments and the pensions. With the current economic situation, have we looked at how we're going to, it's wiped off thousands of pounds. Is that something that we're looking at to mitigate? How is that going to affect our budget?
The Council's general fund investments are largely invested in money market funds that pay a set rate of interest, albeit variable, but not invested in stocks and shares. The pension fund is done on a 3-year triennial valuation. The actuaries will be taking into account the position over the long term rather than any short-term issue. Of course, it also affects the exchange rate, with the dollar and the pound are also taken into account. Perversely, a weakening or pound gives us a bigger return on our overseas investments, because you get more pounds back for a price of $1. The pension fund is a 3-year long-term thing. We're not particularly exposed to too much interest rate in terms of the market. We will be tracking that on a monthly basis. So.
All right, thank you. Councillor Chipper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to know what are the issues with our financial system, because you mentioned that we brought external expertise to help us improve on what we've got.
The core financial system appears to be okay. We can make payments to people, we can raise invoices, we can record debits and credits on the ledger. There is an add-on module that does budget monitoring. Is it ERM? EPM? EPM. That needs further work on it to make it fit for purpose, to give budget managers a day-by-day view and understanding of their budgets. We've brought in external consultants who've implemented that solution elsewhere to advise, because they've done it before several times. They have the technical expertise, but we could never afford as a single council. They sell their services across the country. They can employ 2 experts that give their time just for 2 weeks to us. We can't afford that level of expert as an employee of the council. We are committed to delivering a workable solution by the second month of the financial year, for May, when we start doing budget monitoring, that service managers at all levels of the organisation can understand their budgets and be able to make accurate forecasts against it.
So, from what you say, I take it that is an add-on. Is this a new system, or?
It's a product that sits alongside. When you buy the main product, you buy it at the same time. It's so interlinked with the core product. I'd be loath to call it an add-on. It's a separate system outside of the main module.
So I assume they're both from the same supplier.
Yep, so we're talking about Oracle, which is our ERP system. We didn't implement it as well as we could have done in the previous year, and we need to, as Matt said, we need to make some improvements to make sure it performs better for us as an organisation. It's not a blocker in managing your budget as a corporate director. It just means it's more difficult to manage your budget at the moment, and we're having to spend more time, and it's more manual than it needs to be. We are, as Matt said, we're looking to improve it to make sure it improves its functionality over the time, which fundamentally, if you're sat in my shoes or any of our officers, it just means we will have better information. It will be quicker for us to manage our budgets by using an electronic system that manages our data better. Currently, we are using a hybrid of using a system and Excel spreadsheets, which is not optimal in an organisation. But it's just some improvement work that we've got investment and we've got the expertise to do so.
One more.
It's just that one thing leads to another. So you mentioned Oracle. Is Oracle the name of the financial system or the database which you use?
Yeah.
Base database. What is the?
Yeah. So Oracle's the leading ERP system in local government at the moment, and obviously it's used throughout the world in private sector, public sector, and we've been using it for the last 18 months approximately. But again, we're improving it to make sure we use it better and make sure we make the best use of our investment.
All right, thank you. Councillor Mathers and Councillor Banerjee.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if it's a comment or a question. You mentioned, Carrie, the commercial leases. And Matt mentioned not kind of, was it shunting cost, etc.? I guess as a councillor, I always get a little bit nervous when I hear about reviewing leases or how community groups or others may, and it may be a completely different thing. But I just wanted to make sure there's a check on some of the decisions are made, because I understand that, rightly, each corporate director has to get their saving. What I wouldn't want to see happen is the very things that we rely on with the kind of secondary effects for public health or community cohesion or things are suddenly having to find extra funding or extra costs because of the council needing to achieve savings. I know there's a happy medium. I'm confident officers will find that. But it's always my fear that actually a financial decision is made before a community decision, and then we as councillors see the impact in our wards when community assets, council assets that had a good relationship and really benefited the community are suddenly at risk or are changed, and the fabric of our local community disappears.
So I guess the real key word there is commercial leases. So what we're looking to exploit is the more business associated leases where there obviously is a profit driven position there that we need to make sure that we are getting a return, if you like, on that business that leased property is supporting. When we look at more of our community leasing, there is that option of ability to pay. So whilst we might have a market value that particular site can generate, if it's being used for a more community use, then there is that ability to look at that threshold in terms of whether or not it's a lesser value that we would then impose. And the other things that we can also do to help community leases is to ensure that the restricted user is for that community use. So by restricting those user clauses, we can keep the value down. So that's how we look at it. And I think, the review that we're trying to make there is where we've got businesses, for example, in our buildings that are not paying anything. And I think that's where we need to say, well, hang on a minute, if you were out there in the market, and if it, to use the expression of the chair, what if it was ours? We would want to see a return on those investments from businesses that are using our premises. So that's the kind of balance that we will make, and we're concentrating here on the commercial lettings.
On that side of things, as we know, Councillor Mathers knows that our project for this year, as I've said before, is commercialisation of assets, and the first step in that is identifying what assets we've got in order to be able to look at them across. I mean, obviously some are very obvious and clear, others maybe not so. And there's lots of decisions to be made around the usage of them, whether they stay, whether they go, and all that sort of thing. But there's a lot of work to be done on identifying assets, setting commercial rates, and then look at the community aspect, because some undoubtedly there will be bigger community considerations, but others there won't be, and we need to get much better at that. All right, Councillor Banerjee.
Thank you, Chair. So, looking at Table 2 and the savings proposal, my eyes just drift to the biggest numbers, maybe just naturally, and the target operating model savings proposal is £5 million, which again, in my sort of crude maths, accounts for 43% of the savings. It feels a bit to me like, that's not quite all our eggs in one basket, but we're heavily dependent on that target operating model proposal. I'd like to understand if someone can break it down now or after the meeting, what are the components of that? Because I can't imagine it's just one thing we need to do to save the £5 million. And what are the mitigations in place to make sure those proposals are actually realised? Because, again, that's a huge chunk of the future savings that are proposed, and it just makes me nervous that if things aren't going on track, how does the team responsible plan to course correct and make sure we actually bank those savings? Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, it's me again. I don't want you to feel nervous, Councillor Banerjee. So let me try and allay your fears so you sleep well tonight. So the target operating model is probably twofold. So and what you can see in front of you is £5 million this year, but actually over the period there are substantial savings attached to it. So it's £10 million in the next financial year as well. So there's the recognition that when you look at savings and you're looking at directorate by directorate, actually you need to think differently about how we operate our services and how we work as a council in a different way. So I'm leading a piece of work at the moment to understand what the future operating model of a local authority could look like by using things like AI, by consolidating services together, by looking at, I will try and be non-technical, about thinking about our customer pathways. So at the moment we're looking at things like temporary accommodation and homelessness. So when you think about temporary accommodation and homelessness, you might think it's quite a binary area and you should be looking just in the housing department. Well, actually, by joining up social care, both adults and children's, and looking at families, and by understanding what we can do both to help from a prevention point of view. So as Councillor Mathers will know, what's out in the community to help the people that most need our help before they come to us as a council when they need more help, by helping them at the front door, so helping our vulnerable citizens and our vulnerable clients and our vulnerable residents to get the support they need first time from my team. But also ensuring that as they come into the organisation and there are pathways for them to reduce their costs over time. So fundamentally thinking about how we think about families, how we think about what services are needed in different areas of the borough. We have different demand drivers in different areas of the borough, as I'm sure you're aware, being ward councillors. And where do you put the resources? Where do you put the need? How do you identify through the great data we have to understand where we might align our resources in a different way? So we're doing some trials at the moment about how we join up our services. So joined up teams around families at the front door. So that's both adults, children's and our housing colleagues, but also how we look at doing those from a more locality basis. So that's more of a medium term to understand what the organisation needs. On top of that, given it is £5 million and we're into the financial year, is actually what we can do differently in our directorates. So there's both by looking at the organisation as a whole about how you change what you do, because all local authorities, and particularly ours, and as part of the target operating model, is making sure we lobby the government as well. We're adversely impacted because we've got Heathrow on our doorstep. We're a port authority and we don't receive the funding that represents the demand we're getting. So we'll continue to lobby the government to get fair funding for us as a borough. But also we will need to take some short-term measures, because in each of the directorates there is only so many savings you can take. You have to rethink about the model. So when we're thinking about back office staff, so people that do administration, as I demonstrated before about the use of better technology, better AI, how we consolidate functions together to more centralise them. By spans of control, you'll be able to put services together. You'll be able to deliver cost reductions. So there are some more short-term measures, there's some more medium-term measures, and there's some more long-term measures in there to deliver the savings. But they are substantial, and there is more work that's needed because the rest have got more defined plans. We're working on those plans at the moment around target operating model, and given we've only just started the financial year, we can report back on the progress of that throughout the year.
All right, thank you. One of the other things that occurred to me, apart from what we have to confront as we go along, is also looking at much earlier issues that then lead to pressures. So, for example, we know that three of our, I don't even know how to describe it, but most difficult and most costly areas are adult social care, children's social care and homelessness, which take up I don't know what percentage it is, but it's a massive percentage of our budget. And finding ways of doing those things and things that happen within those areas differently, better, more efficiently, getting to people earlier so they don't end up having to come to the council in crisis or in whatever state, and maybe knitting together the offer from the third sector and signposting to different organisations and so forth. The exponential rise in vulnerability, for example, in children, the extraordinary cost of transport for vulnerable children to schooling. There's loads of other examples, but being able to do those big pressure items differently at a much earlier stage has got to be one. And listen, you've already got enough to do, but I think getting as far downstream, or is it upstream, I never remember, but as far back in the process as we can, and then addressing those issues will then help the ongoing problem. But in the rest of the time, and we'll wrap this up around about 2:30, I want to go through, or start to go through table 2, because this is the example really of this deep dive that I was talking about earlier on. And if I wasn't, I should have done, because one of the roles that we're undertaking is to have a really good look at the individual issues that are put on these reports. And I think the first section under the first portfolio, property, highways and transport, I think pretty much all of these are carries, aren't they? So if we can, and if anybody wants to pitch in with additional questions, but I think if we go through each one of these and get an understanding, because of course against each one of these we have a minus red figure, which is a projected saving, or a saving that's the aim anyway, I think. So if we start with garage voids, and I usually manage to get all these sorts of expressions wrong, but I suspect it actually means garages.
Yes, so apologies, Chair and members of the committee. We did raise this, that for some reason the term garage has been spelled incorrectly, and it's actually come up in the budget book quite a number of times, including it being in twice, because I think it was garage spelt correctly once and then garage spelt with two R's. So it has, as I understand, been corrected moving forward, because but for certainly in my copy that I have, it's still spelt incorrectly. So my apologies that we hadn't picked that up sooner. In terms of the garage voice, so these negative figures, effectively what we're doing here is income generation. So your garage voids, if we look across the garage portfolio, there are a huge amount of garages that are just sitting empty. And so the work that we've been doing over the last year is to look at those garages in terms of what areas, for example, could we lump together and actually create small infill development sites, because obviously that would help with some of our sort of disposal costs, if you like, and being able to look at, if you like, pulling sites together and deciding that actually you could create a small development site that would make more money than garages would over a time. But there are others where there is a demand for garages for storage. They're not really garages of a size that can be used to garage cars anymore, I have to say. There are housing sort of garages that have moved over to the general fund. But they are great for storage, and a lot of people do use them for storage use. And so effectively what we're doing is looking at being able to bring those up with a modest fee to be able to get them to a stage where they can be let out better, and also then make some income from them. So the estimated cost that we put in there is obviously relating to what we think we can make from the level of garages that we know are void at the moment. We've also then, in top of that, looked at fees and charges generally across our asset base.
Can we just pause there for a second?
Yeah, sure.
and just go back over again? So the figure minus 260, what does that mean?
So basically, we're looking to make 260,000 of money,
Yeah.
new income, which would effectively reduce the overall budget for the Place Directorate by bringing in more money.
Right. And why is it a minus figure?
Because we're reducing the cost.
Oh, right.
The
okay.
overall cost of our budget
Yeah.
will be reduced by delivering more income.
Okay, and that's a projected saving.
Yes, so it's put in here as a saving because we're going to make more money, effectively.
Okay. And in terms of practicality, and we're all, as councillors, used to wandering around and seeing a row of garages which look pretty awful.
Yes.
And then there's other garages which could be used for cars, and there's other garages, as you say, which could be used for storage. If part of the garage estate is pretty awful, are we thinking of selling it off?
Yeah, so there are three things that we can do. We can sell them off. We can put them into a company. So for example, the other kind of things that we're looking at there are companies out there that will just take over your garage estate, and effectively what they will do is they will manage that for you and give you a kind of guaranteed income against that those properties. So we could look at outsourcing that and getting somebody to manage it for us. And then we can also look at creating, for a modest sort of investment, making sure that we put them in reasonable repair, and then we let them out ourselves for storage purposes. So those are the three options that we're looking at the moment to bring in an estimated sort of 260,000 of income that we currently don't have from those sites. So we're getting nothing from them at the moment, and they're costing us money to look after. And
with what sort of speed and urgency can we do this?
So we've been working on the proposals this year, so we're ready to implement this financial year.
And are there any that are currently rented but are being defaulted on?
Where they're defaulted on, we either follow that up. If we don't get the rental coming in, we lock them up again so that they can't use them. The one thing about garage rents, it's very easy to stop if people are not paying.
And presumably, one aim is to make garage space available to our residents on some sort of, letting portal or something where they can, once they're in a good state at least, because if you're going to store stuff, I suppose you want it to be secure and dry and all the rest of it.
Yeah, one of the proposals we put through the transformation, which Matthew's area is working with us on, we want to get to a stage where if we've got space for hire, if we've got properties for hire, to be able to have that portal where you can just go on and say, I would like to hire some space for, say, 2 hours to carry out a meeting, or 3 hours to do a children's party, whatever that might be. The ability for us to be able to do that on a system that makes it really easy for people to rent space would be fantastic. And the garage voids and the garage rentals would be an area where we could exploit that kind of system really, really well. It's about accessibility, and it's like everything else. If you go online now, there are sites where they say, come and rent this, come and rent that. Well, what better place to go than to a council that you can trust and use their facilities, that you can trust those facilities. And I think we should exploit that more.
That's exactly what we want to do. Do we have an idea about how many we've got?
In terms of garages?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I haven't got the figure with me, but yes, we do.
Okay. All right,
Sorry
good.
about that.
So the next one down is
so the fees and charges.
Fees and charges and inflationary uplifts.
Yeah, so the fees and charges uplifts, effectively they're already there because we've implemented them as part of the uplift in fees and charges. So if provided the demand continues, and bear in mind people might decide, well, you know, the price has gone up and therefore can we still afford it? So we will get some fallout sometimes. But the idea is that with that inflationary uplift, that should come through almost automatically.
And where do we, this might be Matthew, I don't know, but where do we sit in terms of, there's an expression for it, but comparable fees and charges to our neighbours? So when we've set these fees, we have looked at comparisons. And one of the things that, you know, I'm certainly aware of is we like to be one of the cheapest across the area. So we have made sure when we've assessed those uplifts that we can keep within a parameter of being, you know, a very sort of reasonable council in terms of what we're delivering in terms of charge. So how do we compare? We compare, well, I would say on most of our uplifts we are trying to keep under our competitors. All right. Commercial leases, you've got 200,000. Yeah, so again, this is, I think I said this earlier, this is about looking at the leases where we're operating with commercial operators in those sites who are clearly making profits and making money, and we are not charging them. And so we have a number of sites where we've identified that if we were to charge the commercial lease on those rather than sort of peppercorn rents, we should be able to make that level of increased fee. And just to pick up on Councillor Mather's point, is that businesses or is that community projects? No, some of them are, quite a number of them are businesses. I mean, we've got some businesses in our own offices here that are not paying a rent, and effectively they should be. And, you know, so we are looking to ensure that we are more commercial in the way in which we operate. And, you know, and everybody, I think, needs to realise that if they're utilising our space, you know, they're getting clean offices, they're getting clean places, that all comes at a cost. I think it's right that those commercial operators should be paying for that and not the council taxpayer, which is effectively what the position is if they're not paying rents. Well, there may come a time when we can be benevolent, but it's not now. Councillor Banerjee.
Thank you, Chair. Just a minor segue, actually. Previously in this committee, we talked about creating a repository for council-owned spaces, like rooms and things. And I was just thinking that, you know, for garages, why do you not extend that sort of remit of that directory to include those spaces, so in one location you can see them listed out, the price, rather than having multiple systems, just consolidate that. So just a thought that came to mind as I heard about this opportunity, really, more than anything else. Well, it's all about, and I think that's what each one of these officers knows that my desire for this is all about getting a really accurate asset register of what we have. And I suspect one of the problems is that we don't know exactly what we have, and that's one of the projects that I've spoken to the officers about and what we want to get going on. And Karen and Anisha are going to get together and make sure we can have a single point of contact, whether that's one officer, which may be too much for one person, but certainly a single point of contact that we can start to build this. And I think that garages could be a good example because they're spaces, they just happen to be used for different things. And the three options that Carrie was talking about are exactly what we've been talking about. Yeah. If it's fit for purpose and we can use it, commercialise it. If it's no good, get rid of it. And if there's merit in doing it up and then us commercialising it, we do that. But again, it's when Anisha was trying to put together before I decided to go in this direction, putting together work for this committee meeting on that commercialisation. It was really very difficult because there's so much across the piece in so many different areas, and we need to draw it together and get it under one roof, metaphorically or literally. So that's something that we are really working hard on. Yeah, and I want to see
Chair, I think that's a fair comment.
Real progress on that as soon as we can. But the garage thing's a good idea. I do also suspect that there's quite a lot of garages, if my own observations are anything to go by, that essentially we say, look, do you know what? Sell them. And maybe even look at certain areas and see if it's right for development even.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what we've been doing. We've managed to glean that we've got 2,264 garages. We've got about just over 700 that are void at the moment. So that's what we're trying to exploit.
Yeah, and that's far too many. Council assets, I've just dealt with that essentially. Rateable savings, what's that?
So effectively what we can do now is look at the rateable values on the properties that we have, and in some areas we may be paying too high a rate for that site. So we've been doing some work over the last year which has been reducing our rateable values on certain of our assets so that we pay less rates. And that we've been quite successful with that over the last year, and so we're going to continue with that. Certainly around our car parks, we're finding we're paying a considerable amount of business rates higher than we should be in terms of our car parks. So by going to the valuation office and seeking a reduction in the rateable value, it means the council can pay less rates and therefore we can make more savings on our costs.
When might we see a reduction in that 65? What would that be? 65 what? Is that 65,000?
So I think we talked earlier, didn't we, about profiling. But one of the things that we need to understand with reducing rateable values is we have to put the application in, and then we have to wait for the valuation office to get round and value those for us. There is always, we have to be really careful because there is always the option that it could go up rather than stay where it is. And so we always make sure that we try and find those assets which we know we have them valued ourselves. We get some advice on that to make sure that the ones that we put forward, we're pretty sure the rateable value is going to reduce. But bear in mind, we talked about profiling earlier, and what we would be looking at is you will probably see those savings coming in the latter part of the financial year. They'll come in one go, but they'll come in the latter part of the financial year because obviously it takes a while for that to go through the valuation office.
All right. Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Chair. On the rateable value, so I assume we've done the cost analysis on how much it's going to cost us with the advice, etc., and the energy, the officer time in order to achieve that saving. What's the contingency if we don't, because it's out of our control effectively, with our best guess, with our best effort, we could still maybe only may only get 90% success. I don't know what the rate might be. What's the contingency, or was that already built into the savings target?
So the savings target we've put in there, so what we've done is base this on the savings that we've managed to make over the last few years. So we've looked at that trend analysis and we've put a figure in that we think is reasonable for this year.
Increase MVF by 1%.
So that's the vacancy margin that everybody has got. We were talking about earlier. So everybody's vacancy margin has gone up by 1%. So in that line, that is the element of my saving that I've got to make for the property team in terms of the vacancy margin.
All right. We'll carry on. What are you doing? We'll carry on with Table 2 next time and go through the remainder of those heads and Table 3. But for the next 5 minutes, I'm going to ask Matt Davis to tell us what the information going forward is going to look like. In terms of, I find these tables very helpful, and as we go through them and as I say, have these slightly deeper dives into the individual subject heads, do we get progressive or regressive tables showing us movement, showing us progress, explaining why we haven't achieved what we wanted to achieve? What's the way forward, knowing what we're trying to do here?
Thank you, Chair. The budget approved by the Council is a budget approved by the Council. That won't change unless Council approve or Cabinet approve any changes to that. Where there are changes to that budget that are approved by Cabinet or Council, we are intending, as part of monthly monitoring, to track those changes and report those changes to Cabinet, so there's clear transparency of how the budget numbers we're monitoring against have changed. We can bring that information back to this committee. Accountants like to create a technical name for everything because it keeps them in a job. In local government term, they call budget changes environment. You may have heard that term before. At the moment, this is the snapshot in time at the start of the year. We are going to refresh the budget book and these numbers, as I mentioned earlier, with all the corporate recharges, where finance charge legal and legal charge HR, and we all charge carry, and all the other services. Yeah. So those numbers, as I said, we're going through due diligence on that. Those numbers will be reflected. They're net nil across the council because we're just charging each other, but we will gross those numbers up and report on those. As we move through monthly monitoring, we will begin to get a view on, are we living within the budgets that we've set? Have there been any more opportunities that have emerged and upsides? The government may give us an extra grant, maybe for homelessness. They might recognise the pressures that we've got as a port authority and give us a specific grant. Where we get those budget changes, we'll report upsides where we get them. We will also report the downsides. Remember I said we've set 10 million aside as a contingency. We will almost certainly use some of that. We will report that position. Monthly monitoring historically has looked at the full year budget, a full year forecast, and what the variance is. We are going to improve, as part of the work we're doing with those consultants, our monthly monitoring to also tell you how much we've spent so far this year, to what proportion of that budget we should have spent this year. A lot of things might be equal 12ths. Our social care demand tends to go throughout the year. We don't do much winter gritting in the summer. We don't. But we do things like school activities in the summer where we support those. By and large, things will be equal 12ths. There will be exceptions where we profile the budgets. We will aim to profile the savings targets, because not all of them were even intended to be delivered from April, so we can see how we're doing against that. I'm also keen not just to give you a binary position of the forecast to year end is X. I want to give you a position that says it's X, but other risks exist and it could go higher, but opportunities are emerging, it could go lower, and give you a range of how the outturn is going. We are not doing period one monitoring in detail. We're still working on improving the system to give every budget manager the training and the tool to monitor their budgets. There's very limited activity that occurs in period one. We've only got 1/12 of actuals. We haven't got all the data to make a reasonable projection for what the trends are going like. We will be doing a period 2 monitor in detail. That will be reported in June. We will need to go to Cabinet and appraise Cabinet so that they may have a view as portfolio holders before it comes here, but then you will get monthly monitoring every month that says, this is where we are against a profile budget, this is the forecast outturn, and this is what we are doing about any emerging issues and how we will manage those issues to live within our means.
And that's just to interrupt you, sorry, that's really the crux of it. It's being able to colloquially see the elephants coming over the hill, and what do you have in place? A, for trigger warnings for the elephants, and B, how to turn them around and stop them trampling our crops.
We're in the process of completely redesigning the information that gets summarised and goes to each director and then considered collectively at corporate management team, and after that will come to cabinet. We've looked at, with our external consultants, what good budget monitoring, what best of class budget monitoring looks like, and the extra information that would need to be provided or remodelled or just displayed differently, because I don't want to give budget managers 20 pages of numbers and they can't see the wood for the trees. They need it summarised, but we also need them to be able to then drill into the detail and go down and down to understand, and we need to write narratives that's helpful for services. It is something that we realise I've only got 50 days to the end of May to have this in place, to have it agreed, and to give people the training and guidance so that they know how to do the process, and they also begin to have an understanding of what the responsibilities of a financial budget manager or service manager are. If I give them the tools and I give them the knowledge, I'm then expecting them to do their share of that bargain to collectively manage our budgets. It's not just a finance issue, it's everybody's issue, collectively, in partnership.
And what those departments pass on to finance, or transfer to finance, has got to be the best information, accurate and reliable.
Absolutely. We need to be able to support services as a finance department, but in supporting them, have the information in such a format that we can critically challenge and identify where there might be issues that haven't been reported. That's not to criticise the department, that's to then help them find a solution.
All right, thank you. I'm going to end it there. We've learnt a lot, and it's the first of these new ways of doing things. But I think you can all see the drive and determination, and for what it's worth, passion that we have for making this right. It's a team effort, and we will help you as much as we can, and you will give us the information to be able to do that. So for the moment, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, all of you. All right, so item 7, Cabinet Forward Plan, just a note really, and unless anything leaps off the page as far as that's concerned, we can note that. Yep, okay, and similarly with the work programme. Anisha, anything to add on the work programme? No. Okay, all right. We can come back to that, but I think this will take up an enormous amount, quite rightly, of our time for the immediate future. All right. Next meeting is on the 17th of June, and I look forward, hopefully, to seeing you all at that meeting. Thank you.